Colonel Jake Morrison sat in his office at Fort Harrison, staring at the wedding invitation that had been pinned to his bulletin board for 6 months. The elegant cream paper showed his daughter Katie's name in beautiful script, along with her fiancé Ben Cooper. The date was circled in red marker, this Saturday, 3 days away. Jake had been looking forward to this day more than any mission or promotion in his 30-year military career. His computer buzzed with an incoming message marked urgent. Jake clicked it open and felt his stomach drop. The message was from General Stevens at Space Command Headquarters. The Zephyrian Empire had launched a massive attack on the outer colonies. The mining station New Haven was completely destroyed. Early reports showed thousands of civilians dead. More attacks were expected within hours. Jake's phone rang immediately. He picked it up knowing what was coming. "Morrison, we need the 47th Battalion ready for immediate deployment," General Stevens said without any greeting. "This is the big one we've been preparing for. The aliens have finally made their move." Jake looked at the wedding invitation again. "Sir, my daughter's wedding is in 3 days. I've already missed so many important moments in her life. This wedding means everything to her. I understand your situation, Colonel, but you're the only unit trained for deep space operations against alien technology. Your men have studied Zephyrian tactics for 2 years. Without your team, we're looking at the possible fall of 3 more colonies before reinforcements can arrive." Jake closed his eyes. This was the conversation he had dreaded his entire career. The choice between duty and family that every military parent faced. But this time felt different. This time it might be the last chance to be the father Katie deserved. "How long is the mission timeline?" Jake asked. "Minimum 2 weeks, probably longer. The Zephyrian mothership is deep in enemy territory. Even with our fastest ships, you're looking at a week just to reach the target zone." Katie had spent months planning this wedding. She had called him every week to share details about flowers, music, and seating arrangements. For the first time in years, she seemed excited to have him involved in her life. Jake remembered how her voice had sounded when she asked him to walk her down the aisle. There had been hope in that voice, hope that maybe they could finally have a real relationship. "Sir, I need to request emergency leave. My second-in-command, Major Rodriguez, can lead the mission." "Rodriguez is good, but he doesn't have your experience with alien warfare." "Jake, I'm not going to order you to abandon your daughter's wedding, but I need you to understand what's at stake here. The Zephyrians have weapons we've never seen before. They're not just raiding colonies anymore. Intelligence suggests this is the beginning of a full invasion." Jake rubbed his temples. Outside his window, he could see soldiers training on the parade ground. Young men and women who trusted him to lead them into impossible situations and bring them home alive. His unit wasn't just any group of soldiers. They were specially trained for operations against alien technology. Each member had been selected for their unique skills and psychological profile. They had trained together for 2 years, developing tactics specifically for fighting the Zephyrian Empire. The phone buzzed with another call. Jake saw Katie's number on the display. "General, I need to take this call. Can you give me 30 minutes to make my decision?" "You have 20 minutes, Colonel. The transport ships are already preparing for launch." Jake switched to Katie's call. Her voice was bright and excited. "Dad, I just wanted to confirm you'll be at the rehearsal dinner tomorrow night. Ben's parents are flying in from California and I want you to meet them properly." Jake felt his heart breaking. "Katie, sweetheart, something has come up at work." The excitement in her voice disappeared immediately. "What kind of something?" "There's been an attack on one of our colonies. My unit is being deployed for an emergency mission." The silence on the other end lasted for several seconds. When Katie spoke again, her voice was cold and distant. "Of course there is. There's always an emergency. Always a mission. Always something more important than your family. Katie, this isn't like the other times. This is different. The aliens have never attacked with this level of force before. If we don't stop them now, they might reach Earth itself. Do you hear yourself, Dad? You're making the same excuses you've made my entire life. You missed my high school graduation for a training exercise. You missed my college graduation for a peacekeeping mission. You missed my birthday parties, my school plays, and every major moment of my childhood. And now you're going to miss my wedding too." Jake could hear tears in her voice now. "I thought this time would be different. I thought maybe just once I would be more important than your job. You are important to me. You're the most important thing in my life. Then prove it. Stay here. Let someone else save the world for once." Jake looked at his computer screen showing casualty reports from New Haven. Entire families had been wiped out. Children who would never see their parents again. The Zephyrian weapons had turned the mining facility into molten metal within hours. Katie, thousands of people are dead. More will die if we don't stop this attack. And what about me, Dad? What about the daughter who dies a little bit every time you choose your duty over your family? I've spent 28 years competing with the military for my father's attention, and I've lost every single time. The line went quiet, except for Katie's quiet crying. Jake felt tears running down his own face. He had always told himself that his service protected people like Katie, that every mission, every deployment, every sacrifice was to keep his daughter safe in a dangerous universe. But sitting here listening to her heartbreak, he wondered if he had been lying to himself all along. Katie, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for all the times I wasn't there. But if I don't go on this mission, if I don't lead my team, more families will lose everything. I can't live with that knowledge. And I can't live with having a father who will always choose strangers over his own daughter. Don't come to the wedding, Dad, I mean it. If you walk out on me now, if you abandon me one more time, then don't ever come back. I'm done waiting for a father who will never put me first. The line went dead. Jake stared at the phone for a long moment, then looked back at the wedding invitation. His daughter's beautiful smile looked back at him from the engagement photo attached to the corner. His computer chimed with another urgent message. The transport ships would launch in 15 minutes with or without him. Jake stood up slowly, his body feeling much older than his 55 years. He walked to his equipment locker and began pulling out his combat gear. Each piece felt heavier than usual, weighted down with the knowledge of what he was giving up. As he sealed his armor and checked his weapons, Jake made himself a promise. This would be the last time. After this mission, he would request a transfer to a desk job. No more deep space operations. No more emergency deployments. He would find a way to earn Katie's forgiveness, even if it took the rest of his life. But first he had to save the colonies, even if it cost him his daughter's love forever. The transport ship UCS Ranger cut through space toward the outer colonies, carrying Jake Morrison and his elite team deeper into enemy territory. Jake sat in the briefing room with his 11 best soldiers, studying holographic displays of the alien threat they were about to face. The blue glow of the projector cast strange shadows on their faces as they absorbed information that would determine whether they lived or died in the coming battle. The Zephyrian Empire had been humanity's greatest fear for nearly a decade. The aliens stood 8 feet tall with bodies covered in natural crystalline armor that could deflect most human weapons. Their technology was centuries ahead of Earth's best equipment. Where humans used metal and electronics, the Zephyrians used living crystal that could repair itself and adapt to different threats. Their ships looked like massive gemstones floating through space, beautiful and deadly at the same time. The attack on New Haven was unlike anything we've seen before, said Lieutenant Commander Sarah Williams, the intelligence officer who had joined them for this mission. Previous Zephyrian raids targeted military installations or strategic resources. This time they destroyed everything. Homes, schools, hospitals. They didn't try to capture anything or anyone. They just burned it all. Jake studied the before and after images of New Haven Colony. The mining facility had housed 40,000 people just 2 days ago. Now it was a crater of melted metal and glass. The Zephyrian energy weapons had been thorough and merciless. What changed? Asked Sergeant Danny Rodriguez, Jake's second in command. For 5 years they've been making surgical strikes. Why go scorched earth now? Sarah pulled up new intelligence reports. We intercepted some of their communications during the attack. Our translation systems are still primitive, but we've learned something important. The Zephyrians aren't just expanding their territory anymore. They're running from something. The hologram shifted to show deep space scanner readings from the edge of known galaxy. Strange energy signatures pulsed at the very limit of their detection range. We call them the Devourers, Sarah continued. The Zephyrian transmissions suggest these things consume entire star systems. They break down matter at the atomic level and convert it into raw energy. Planets, stars, everything gets absorbed. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. How close are they to Zephyrian space? Based on the transmission timestamps, maybe 6 months. The Zephyrians have been fighting a losing retreat for years. They need new territory to establish defensive positions. Human space represents their last hope for survival. Sergeant Alex Carter, the team's demolitions expert, leaned forward. So we're not just fighting an invasion. We're fighting refugees who have nowhere else to go. Desperate refugees with weapons that can turn planets into ash, Jake replied. He had been studying Zephyrian technology since first contact 7 years ago. Their energy weapons used focused plasma contained in crystalline matrices. The crystal could store enormous amounts of power and release it in precise bursts. A single Zephyrian soldier could level a city block. The briefing hologram changed to show their target. The Zephyrian mothership Void Spear hung in space like a massive purple crystal, nearly 2 miles long. Smaller ships orbited around it like satellites around a planet. "This is what we're up against," Sarah said. "The Void Spear coordinates the entire Zephyrian fleet. If we can disable its command systems, their other ships will lose tactical coordination. Without unified command, our main fleet can engage them ship by ship." Jake zoomed in on the mothership's structure. Unlike human vessels with clear sections and corridors, the Zephyrian ship looked like it had been grown rather than built. Crystalline passages wound through the interior in organic patterns that made no sense to human logic. "How do we even navigate inside that thing?" asked Corporal Lisa Park, their communications specialist. "We don't know," Sarah admitted. "We have theoretical maps based on energy readings and structural analysis, but we've never had humans inside a Zephyrian capital ship before." The team absorbed this sobering information. They were being asked to infiltrate an alien vessel using incomplete intelligence against an enemy that had superior technology and nothing left to lose. "What about their ground forces?" asked Private Kevin Torres, the team's medic. At 19, he was the youngest member of the unit, but Jake had never worked with a more skilled field surgeon. Sarah brought up combat footage from previous engagements. Zephyrian warriors moved with inhuman grace, their crystalline armor shifting color to match their surroundings. Their weapons fired concentrated energy bolts that could punch through tank armor. "They're stronger and faster than humans," Sarah explained. "But they have weaknesses. The crystal armor takes time to adapt to new threats. If you can hit them with different types of weapons in rapid succession, you can overwhelm their defenses." Jake nodded. "That's why we carry mixed armaments: ballistic weapons, energy weapons, and explosives. Keep them guessing what's coming next." The briefing continued for 3 hours. They studied ship layouts, weapon capabilities, and tactical scenarios. But Jake's mind kept drifting to Katie's wedding, now just 2 days away. While he was learning how to kill aliens, his daughter was probably having her final dress fitting or reviewing seating charts with her mother. "Colonel," Danny said quietly after the formal briefing ended. "You okay? You seem distracted." Jake realized he had been staring at nothing while the other team members filed out of the room. "My daughter's wedding is tomorrow." Danny winced. He had a 10-year-old daughter of his own back on Earth. "That's rough, sir." "I'm sorry. She told me not to come back if I left for this mission. She didn't mean it. Kids say things when they're hurt. She's 28, Danny. She's not a kid anymore. She's a woman who's tired of having an absent father." The two men sat in silence for a moment, listening to the ship's engines humming around them. Through the porthole, stars streaked past as they raced toward battle. "My ex-wife was right about one thing," Jake continued. "I've spent more time fighting aliens than I have raising my daughter. I know more about Zephyrian crystal technology than I know about Katie's favorite movies or what she studied in college." "The job demands sacrifices," Danny said. "But it's worth it. We keep the people we love safe, do we? Or do we just tell ourselves that to justify missing the most important moments of their lives?" Danny didn't have an answer for that. None of them did. The military had trained them to fight impossible battles and complete impossible missions, but it had never taught them how to balance duty with love. The ship's intercom crackled to life. "All personnel, we are approaching the combat zone. Enemy vessels detected on long-range sensors. Combat deployment in T-6 hours." Jake stood up and straightened his uniform. Personal doubts and family regrets would have to wait. Right now, 40,000 dead civilians were depending on his team to prevent more massacres. 3 human colonies lay directly in the Zephyrian advance path. If the aliens weren't stopped here, hundreds of thousands more people would die. As Jake walked toward the armory to prepare his weapons, he thought about Katie walking down the aisle without him. In 12 hours, while he was fighting for his life aboard an alien ship, she would be promising to love and honor another man. Ben Cooper would be standing where Jake should have been, supporting her on the most important day of her life. Jake loaded armor-piercing rounds into his rifle and checked the power cells on his energy weapon. Each piece of equipment had been specifically designed to fight Zephyrian forces. Every bullet and every charge pack represented months of research and development by Earth's best scientists. But as he sealed his combat armor and ran final systems checks, Jake wondered if all the advanced technology in the universe could fill the hole he had torn in his relationship with his daughter. Some wounds couldn't be healed with weapons or tactics or military efficiency. The battle ahead would determine the fate of human civilization. But Jake knew that win or lose, he had already lost the thing that mattered most to him. The stealth shuttle drifted silently through space toward the massive Zephyrian mothership. Jake Morrison and his 11-person team sat in complete darkness, their advanced armor systems running on minimal power to avoid detection. The experimental stealth technology wrapped around their small craft like an invisible blanket, bending sensor waves away from their hull. Through his helmet display, Jake could see the void sphere growing larger as they approached. The alien vessel was even more impressive up close than in the intelligence briefings. Purple and blue crystals covered its surface in complex geometric patterns that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. Smaller Zephyrian ships moved around the mothership like guards protecting their queen. 2 minutes to contact, whispered Sergeant Rodriguez through the communication system. As pilot, he was guiding their shuttle toward a maintenance port that intelligence believed was lightly defended. Jake checked his weapons one final time. His assault rifle was loaded with armor-piercing rounds designed specifically for Zephyrian crystal armor. His sidearm fired concentrated energy bursts that could overload alien defensive systems. On his belt, he carried enough explosives to level a city block. Every piece of equipment had been tested against captured Zephyrian technology, but this would be the first real combat trial. "Remember the mission parameters," Jake said quietly to his team. "We need to reach the central command center and plant the virus bombs in their main computer systems. The fleet coordination protocols are stored in crystalline memory banks that we can't hack remotely. We have to get inside and physically destroy them." The shuttle made contact with the alien hull with barely a whisper of sound. Jake felt rather than heard the magnetic clamps engaging, as Rodriguez sealed their craft to the Zephyrian maintenance port. "Cutting through now," said Corporal Park, their tech specialist. She activated a plasma torch designed to cut through alien metal. The purple glow filled their small compartment as she worked to create an entry point. Jake's mind wandered for a moment to Katie's wedding, which should be starting in just a few hours. She would be putting on her dress right now, probably with her mother and bridesmaids helping with the final preparations. Lisa would be trying to stay strong for their daughter while privately cursing Jake for abandoning their family one more time. "We're through," Park announced. She had cut a perfect circle through the alien hull large enough for them to enter single file. Jake went first, dropping down into a dimly lit corridor that looked more like the inside of a cave than a spaceship. The walls were covered in crystalline formations that glowed with soft purple light. The air felt thick and warm, with a strange metallic taste that made breathing uncomfortable even through their air filtration systems. One by one, his team dropped through the entry point and formed a defensive perimeter. The Zephyrian corridor stretched in both directions, curving away into darkness. Strange symbols were carved into the walls, probably some kind of alien writing system that human translators had never decoded. "Which way?" asked Sergeant Carter, scanning the area with his motion detector. Jake consulted the theoretical map that intelligence had provided. The command center should be deeper inside the ship, toward what they believed was the core structure, but the organic layout of the alien vessel made navigation nearly impossible. "This way," Jake decided, pointing toward what seemed like the main corridor. "Stay close and watch for defensive systems." They moved through the alien ship like ghosts, their footsteps muffled by the soft crystalline floor. The walls around them seemed almost alive, with patterns of light flowing through the crystal formations like blood through veins. Everything about the Zephyrian technology felt organic and grown rather than manufactured. As they progressed deeper into the ship, Jake noticed that the air was getting warmer, and the crystal formations were becoming more complex. They passed what looked like sleeping chambers carved directly into the walls, each one shaped to accommodate the tall, angular forms of Zephyrian bodies. "Movement ahead," Carter whispered, raising his weapon. Jake saw them at the same moment. 3 Zephyrian warriors were standing guard at an intersection of corridors. Their crystalline armor shifted from purple to blue as they detected the presence of intruders. The aliens were even more impressive in person than in training simulations. They stood 8 feet tall with 4 arms ending in sharp, blade-like appendages. Their faces were hidden behind crystal masks that reflected their surroundings like mirrors. "Engage," Jake ordered. The firefight erupted instantly. Energy bolts from Zephyrian weapons lit up the corridor like lightning, leaving smoking craters in the walls where they missed their targets. Jake's team spread out and returned fire with their mixed armaments, trying to overwhelm the aliens' adaptive defenses. Jake aimed for the center Zephyrian and fired 3 quick bursts from his energy weapon. The alien's armor absorbed the first 2 shots, its crystal surface shifting to counter the energy frequency. But the third shot found a weak point where the armor was still adapting, and the Zephyrian stumbled backward with a sound like breaking glass. Rodriguez flanked left and opened fire with his ballistic weapon. The physical rounds struck the wounded alien's armor just as it was adjusting to energy weapons, punching through the crystal and dropping the creature to the floor. The remaining 2 Zephyrians pressed their attack, moving with inhuman speed down the corridor. Their blade arms extended into sword-like weapons that could cut through human armor like paper. Carter lobbed a grenade that exploded in a shower of crystal fragments, but the aliens leaped over the blast with graceful ease. Torres, medical kit, Jake called as he saw Private Johnson go down with a deep gash across his chest armor. The Zephyrian blades had found the weak points in their protective systems. The battle moved through the alien corridors like a deadly dance. Jake's team used their training and superior tactics to stay ahead of the physically superior aliens, but each engagement cost them ammunition and energy they couldn't afford to lose. As they fought their way deeper into the ship, Jake began to realize that the mission was more dangerous than anyone had predicted. The theoretical maps were completely wrong. The Zephyrian ship wasn't laid out according to human logic or engineering principles. Corridors led in circles, chambers opened onto empty space, and the gravity seemed to shift direction without warning. "Colonel, we're lost," admitted Park after consulting her navigation equipment for the 10th time. "Nothing matches the intelligence reports." Jake checked his own tactical display and saw that she was right. They had been inside the alien ship for 2 hours and seemed no closer to finding the command center. Worse, they were leaving a trail of destruction that the Zephyrians would certainly follow. "Sir, motion detectors are picking up movement from multiple directions," Carter reported. "I think they're surrounding us." Jake realized with growing dread that they had walked into a trap. The lightly defended maintenance port had been too easy to breach. The scattered resistance they had encountered was too light for a ship this important. The Zephyrians had known they were coming and had allowed them to penetrate deep into the vessel, where escape would be nearly impossible. "Defensive positions," Jake ordered, but even as he spoke, he could hear the sound of crystal armor moving through the corridors around them. The aliens were converging on their position from all directions. The team took cover behind crystal formations that jutted from the walls like natural barriers. Jake counted his remaining ammunition and realized they didn't have enough firepower to fight their way out against the numbers they were facing. As energy bolts began flying from multiple directions, Jake thought about Katie standing at the altar without him. If he died here, she would never know that his last thoughts were of her, that he regretted every moment he had chosen duty over family. She would remember him as the father who abandoned her on the most important day of her life. A Zephyrian energy bolt struck the crystal formation next to Jake's head, showering him with purple fragments. The aliens were closing in from 3 sides, their superior numbers and knowledge of their own ship giving them every advantage. Jake keyed his radio to broadcast on all frequencies, hoping against hope that someone would hear his final message. "This is Colonel Morrison of the 47th Battalion. We have penetrated the Zephyrian command ship but are pinned down by superior forces. Tell my daughter Katie that I'm sorry I missed her wedding. Tell her that I love her more than anything in the universe." As Jake prepared for what seemed like his final battle, he wondered if choosing duty over love had been the greatest mistake of his life. Energy bolts filled the crystalline corridor as Jake Morrison and his team found themselves surrounded by Zephyrian warriors. The aliens moved through their own ship with deadly precision, their crystal armor adapting to each weapon the humans fired. Jake counted at least 20 Zephyrians converging on their position from 3 different passages. "We're running low on ammunition," Rodriguez called out between bursts of gunfire. His rifle clicked empty and he smoothly switched to his sidearm. "At this rate, we'll be down to harsh language in 10 minutes. Jake pressed himself against a crystal formation as purple energy bolts scorched the air where his head had been moments before. The aliens were methodically advancing, using their superior numbers to overwhelm the human position. Each time his team managed to drop 1 Zephyrian, Two more appeared to take its place. "Colonel, I'm reading massive energy buildup throughout the ship," reported Park, her scanner showing alarming readings. "Whatever they're powering up, it's big enough to level a city." Through the chaos of battle, Jake heard something that made his blood run cold. The Zephyrians were communicating with each other in their crystalline language, but his translator was picking up fragments of meaning. They weren't just trying to capture or kill the human intruders. They were preparing to execute something called the Final Protocol. A new group of Zephyrians appeared at the far end of the corridor, but these were different from the warriors they had been fighting. These aliens wore more elaborate crystal armor decorated with flowing patterns that seemed to move on their own. Jake realized they were looking at Zephyrian command staff, possibly even their ship's leadership. One of the alien leaders spoke in accented but understandable English. "Human soldiers, you have fought with honor, but your mission ends here. We know why you have come. You seek to disable our coordination systems and leave our fleet vulnerable to your warships." Jake kept his weapon trained on the alien while responding. "Surrender now and we might let some of your crew survive when our fleet arrives." The Zephyrian leader made a sound that might have been laughter. "Your fleet will never arrive, human. We have been monitoring your communications since you entered our space. Even now, the Devourers close in on your home system. Earth has perhaps 6 months before it shares the fate of our homeworld." The words hit Jake like a physical blow. "You're lying." "We do not lie about extinction. The Devourers consume everything in their path. Planets, stars, entire civilizations reduced to basic energy and absorbed into their collective mass. We have watched 1,000 worlds die screaming." Another Zephyrian leader stepped forward, this one's armor showing signs of battle damage that looked old and deep. "We came to your space not as conquerors, but as refugees. We sought to negotiate for territory where our people could establish new colonies, but your leaders responded with violence." Jake felt his worldview shifting as the alien continued speaking. "The attack on New Haven was not our choice. A faction of our military leaders decided that humans would never willingly share space with our kind. They believed that only through demonstration of our power could we force negotiations. Thousands of innocent people died," Jake said, his voice thick with anger. "And thousands more will die on both sides if this war continues. The Devourers care nothing for our conflicts. They will consume human and Zephyrian alike when they arrive." Rodriguez looked at Jake with confusion. "Sir, what are they talking about?" Before Jake could respond, the ship shuddered violently around them. The crystal formations on the walls began pulsing with urgent red light, and an alien alarm system filled the air with haunting musical tones. "The final protocol has begun," the Zephyrian leader announced. "If we cannot reach an understanding, then this ship and everyone aboard it will be destroyed to prevent our technology from falling into Devourer hands when they arrive." Jake realized with growing horror that they were trapped aboard a ship that was about to self-destruct. "How long do we have?" 20 minutes until the core overload reaches critical mass. There are no escape pods that can reach minimum safe distance in time. The tactical situation had just become impossible. Even if Jake's team could fight their way back to their entry point, their small shuttle wouldn't be fast enough to escape the explosion of a ship this size. "There might be another way," said Sergeant Rodriguez quietly. Jake saw his second-in-command studying readings on his portable scanner. "The ship's power core is crystal-based, right? If we could create a controlled overload in just the right spot, we might be able to disable the final protocol and create an opening for the escape pods." The Zephyrian leader's armor shifted to a brighter shade of blue, which Jake had learned indicated surprise. That would require someone to reach the core chamber and manually adjust the crystal matrix while it's building toward overload. The radiation levels would be lethal within minutes. Jake understood immediately what Rodriguez was suggesting. It was a suicide mission that might save everyone else aboard the ship, both human and alien. "I'll do it," Rodriguez said simply. "I studied their power systems during training. I know how their crystal matrices work." "No," Jake replied firmly. "I'm the commanding officer. If anyone's staying behind, it should be me. With respect, sir, you have a daughter waiting for you back home. I'm just a career soldier with no family depending on me." Jake felt tears forming in his eyes. Rodriguez was wrong about having no family. The team was his family, and Jake was about to lose one of his brothers. "Danny, there has to be another way." "There isn't, and we both know it. Besides, somebody needs to get this intelligence about the Devourers back to Earth. Command needs to know what's really coming." The Zephyrian leader interrupted their conversation. If your soldier can stop the final protocol, I will order all remaining escape pods to be programmed for human use. Our navigation systems will guide you to the nearest human outpost. Jake looked around at his team. They were trapped deep inside an alien ship that was about to explode, surrounded by enemies who might actually be potential allies against a greater threat. Everything he thought he knew about this war was changing. Rodriguez, if you're determined to do this, then make it count. Get us access to their escape systems and whatever intelligence they have about these devourer things. Danny Rodriguez smiled and checked his equipment one final time. Tell my daughter Maria that her daddy died saving people. Tell her I loved her more than anything in the universe. As Rodriguez prepared to sacrifice his life for the mission, Jake thought about Katie's wedding happening thousands of light years away. His daughter was probably walking down the aisle right now, believing that her father had chosen duty over love one final time. She would never know that her father was trapped aboard an alien ship, learning that the real enemy was still coming. The ship shuddered again as the core overload built toward critical levels. Rodriguez gathered his equipment and headed toward the power core chamber, ready to give his life so that others might survive to fight another day. Jake watched his friend and second-in-command disappear into the crystalline corridors, knowing that he would never see Danny Rodriguez alive again. The cost of this mission was already higher than anyone had imagined, and Jake suspected it was only going to get worse. Katie Morrison stood in front of the full-length mirror in the church preparation room, staring at her reflection, while her mother Lisa adjusted the vintage lace veil that had belonged to Katie's grandmother. The wedding dress was everything she had dreamed of since childhood, flowing silk with delicate pearl buttons and a train that swept elegantly behind her. But the joy she had imagined feeling on this day was missing, replaced by a hollow ache in her chest. You look absolutely beautiful, sweetheart, Lisa said, stepping back to admire her daughter. At 53, Lisa Morrison had aged gracefully despite the stress of being married to a career military officer. Her own divorce from Jake had been finalized 8 years ago, but she had never remarried. Too much of her heart was still tied up with the stubborn soldier who always chose duty over family. Katie touched the pearl necklace at her throat, another family heirloom passed down through generations. Do you think he's even thinking about me right now? Or is he completely focused on whatever mission was more important than his daughter's wedding? Lisa felt her own anger rising at Jake's absence, but she tried to keep it out of her voice. This was Katie's day, and she deserved to feel loved and supported regardless of her father's choices. Your father loves you more than anything in the world. He's just never been good at showing it. Love isn't enough, Mom. Love without action is just words, and Dad has always been better with guns than with words. Through the small window, Katie could see guests arriving at the chapel, friends from college, cousins from out of state, Ben's large extended family from California. Everyone had traveled hundreds or thousands of miles to celebrate this moment with them. Everyone except the one person whose presence mattered most to her. Maybe we should postpone, Katie said suddenly. Give him another chance to choose me over his job. Absolutely not, Lisa replied firmly. Ben is a wonderful man who loves you completely. Your father's absence doesn't change the fact that you're marrying your best friend and soulmate. Don't let Jake's poor choices ruin the happiness you found. Katie knew her mother was right, but the knowledge didn't ease the pain. She had spent her entire childhood watching other girls' fathers at school events, dance recitals, and graduation ceremonies while her own father was deployed to some distant corner of the galaxy. She had told herself that her wedding would be different, that this one day would finally belong to her instead of the military. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Ben Cooper stepped into the room, looking handsome in his black tuxedo but concerned about his bride's state of mind. At 31, Ben was a pediatric surgeon at the local children's hospital, dedicated to healing rather than fighting. He represented everything Jake Morrison was not: present, emotionally available, and committed to putting family first. I know it's bad luck to see the bride before the ceremony, Ben said gently, but I wanted to check on you. The guests are starting to ask about your father. Katie felt fresh tears threatening to ruin her carefully applied makeup. What should I tell them? That my father thought fighting aliens was more important than walking his daughter down the aisle. Ben crossed the room and took Katie's hands in his. Tell them that your father is serving his country and that you're proud of his sacrifice. Then let me walk you down that aisle and marry you in front of everyone who loves us. You would do that? Walk me down the aisle? I'd be honored. Though I was thinking maybe your mother could do it instead. Lisa raised you while your father was off saving the world. She's the parent who was actually here for you. Lisa felt tears forming in her own eyes. Oh, honey, I don't know if that's traditional. Nothing about our family has ever been traditional, Katie replied with a sad smile. But you're right. You're the one who deserves to give me away. The church organist began playing the processional music, signaling that the ceremony was about to begin. Katie took one last look at herself in the mirror, straightening her shoulders and lifting her chin. She had learned long ago how to be strong in her father's absence. Today would just be another test of that strength. The bridal party lined up in the corridor outside the chapel doors. Katie's maid of honor, Sarah, her college roommate and best friend, squeezed her hand supportively. You sure you're okay with this? I have to be. I've been preparing for this moment my whole life, and I'm not going to let his absence ruin it. Through the open chapel doors, Katie could see 200 guests standing and turning to watch her entrance. Ben waited at the altar with his groomsmen, his face glowing with love and anticipation. The church was decorated exactly as she had planned, with white roses and soft lighting that made everything look magical. But the front row on the bride's side had an empty chair where Jake Morrison should have been sitting. Katie had insisted on leaving it vacant rather than asking someone else to fill it. The empty space served as a silent reminder of the choice her father had made. As the wedding march began, Katie linked arms with her mother and began the slow walk down the aisle. Each step felt like a small victory against the pain of abandonment. She smiled at friends and family members, accepting their love and support while trying to ignore the whispered questions about her father's absence. Halfway down the aisle, Katie's composure finally cracked. A tear rolled down her cheek as she realized that this moment she had dreamed about for years would always be marked by her father's choice to prioritize strangers over his own daughter. All the birthday parties he had missed, all the school events where she had sat alone, all the times she had needed her father and found only empty space. Lisa felt her daughter's emotional struggle and tightened her grip on Katie's arm. He doesn't deserve your tears today. You're marrying a man who will never make you compete with his job for his attention. As they reached the altar, Katie looked into Ben's kind eyes and felt some of her pain begin to ease. Here was a man who had never missed the important moment in their 3-year relationship, who had postponed his own career opportunities to stay close to her, who had proven again and again that she would always be his first priority. The minister began the ceremony with words about love, commitment, and the joining of two families. But Katie couldn't stop her mind from wandering to her father. Was he thinking about her right now? Did he regret his choice? Or was he so focused on his mission that he had already forgotten about the wedding entirely? As Ben began reciting his vows, promising to love and cherish her through all of life's challenges, Katie made her own silent promise. She would not repeat her parents' mistakes. She would not marry a man who would abandon her for his career, and she would not raise children who would have to compete with their father's job for his love and attention. Do you, Katie Morrison, take Benjamin Cooper to be your husband? The minister asked. Katie looked out at the congregation one final time, hoping against hope that she might see her father standing in the back of the church. But there was no sign of Jake Morrison, just family and friends who had chosen to be present for the most important day of her life. I do, Katie said clearly, her voice carrying throughout the chapel. As Ben slipped the ring onto her finger, Katie felt a mixture of joy and sadness that would mark this day forever in her memory. She was gaining a husband who loved her completely, but she was also finally accepting that her father would never be the parent she needed him to be. The ceremony continued around her, but Katie's thoughts were thousands of light years away, wondering if Jake Morrison was still alive and whether he would ever realize what he had given up for duty. The escape pod plummeted through empty space, its hull glowing red-hot from the explosion that had destroyed the Zephyrian mothership Void Spear. Jake Morrison and his 7 surviving team members were crammed into the alien vessel, barely conscious from the violent ejection that had saved their lives. Through the small porthole, Jake could see debris from the massive ship scattered across thousands of miles of space like deadly confetti. Sergeant Rodriguez was gone. His sacrifice had not only stopped the ship's self-destruct sequence, but had also created the massive explosion that disabled the entire Zephyrian fleet. The other alien ships were now drifting powerless, their coordination systems destroyed along with their command vessel. The mission had been a tactical success, but the cost had been higher than Jake could bear. "Colonel, you need to see this," said Corporal Park weakly. She was working with the pod's alien navigation system, trying to determine their location. "According to these readings, we're not in human space anymore. The explosion threw us way off course." Jake forced himself to focus on their immediate survival situation. His left leg was badly injured from shrapnel during their escape, and several other team members needed medical attention. Private Torres, their medic, was doing his best with limited supplies, but they were in no condition for an extended journey. "How far off course?" Jake asked. "At least 3 days from the nearest human outpost, assuming this pod can maintain current speed. But there's a problem. The power systems are alien technology that none of us understand. We have no idea how long the life support will last." Jake looked around at his surviving soldiers. Carter, Park, Torres, Johnson, Williams, Martinez, and Scott. 8 people who had trusted him to lead them home safely. 8 people whose families would blame him if they died in the empty void between stars. "What about communications?" asked Sergeant Carter. "Can we send a distress signal?" "The communication system was damaged during the explosion. I might be able to jury-rig something, but it would take time and parts we don't have." Jake closed his eyes and tried to think. His daughter's wedding was over by now. Katie had walked down the aisle without him, exchanged vows with Ben Cooper, and started her new life as a married woman. She would spend her honeymoon believing that her father had chosen duty over love one final time. The thought of Katie's disappointment gave Jake new determination. He had failed her as a father for 28 years, but he wasn't going to die in space and leave her with that pain forever. Somehow he had to find a way to get his team home and make things right with his daughter. "Torres, how bad are our injuries?" Jake asked. The young medic looked up from treating Johnson's concussion. "You've got a compound fracture in your left leg that needs surgery. Johnson has a severe head injury that could be serious. Martinez has internal bleeding that I can't treat with field equipment. We need a real medical facility soon. Time frame? Johnson could slip into a coma within hours if his brain swelling gets worse. Martinez might last a day or two, but that's optimistic." Jake made his decision. "Park, show me that communication system. Even if it's damaged, there might be something we can do." For the next 4 hours, Jake and Park worked together to understand the alien technology that kept them alive. The Zephyrian systems were based on living crystal that could adapt and repair itself, but they operated according to principles that seemed to defy human engineering logic. "I think I understand how this works," Park said finally. "The crystals store and transmit energy in patterns that our equipment reads as random noise. But if we could modulate our own signals to match their frequency patterns, we might be able to boost our transmission range." "What do you need?" "Components from our weapons, some of the crystal fragments from the pod's damaged sections, and about 6 hours of trial and error." Jake nodded. "Do it. Everyone else, inventory our supplies and see what we can use for repairs." As his team worked with desperate efficiency, Jake found himself thinking about the Zephyrian leader's warning about the Devourers. If the aliens were telling the truth, then Earth faced an extinction-level threat that made their current mission seem trivial. The intelligence they had gathered about this new enemy could be crucial for humanity's survival. But first, they had to survive long enough to deliver that intelligence. Jake pulled himself over to the pod's small medical area, where Torres was monitoring Johnson's condition. The injured soldier was unconscious, his breathing shallow and irregular. "How is he?" "Not good. The brain swelling is getting worse, and I don't have the equipment to relieve the pressure. He needs emergency surgery within the next few hours." Jake felt the familiar weight of command responsibility settling on his shoulders. Every decision he made could mean the difference between life and death for his people. It was a burden he had carried for 15 years, but it had never felt heavier than it did right now. "Colonel," Martinez called weakly from his position near the pod's rear bulkhead, "I found something in the alien storage compartments. Looks like emergency medical supplies." Jake made his way over to examine the find. The Zephyrian medical kit contained crystalline devices that hummed with internal energy. None of it looked like human medical equipment, but desperate situations called for desperate measures. "Torres, can you make sense of any of this?" The medic studied the alien devices carefully. "Maybe. The crystals seem to respond to biological signatures. If I'm reading this correctly, this device might be some kind of tissue regeneration system. Is it safe to use on humans? I have no idea. But Johnson is going to die without intervention and Martinez isn't far behind. We might not have a choice. Jake wrestled with another impossible decision: risk his soldiers' lives on alien medical technology that might kill them, or watch them die slowly from injuries he could potentially treat. "Sir?" Park called from her workstation. "I've got the communication system partially working. I can send a signal, but I don't know if anyone will receive it." "Send it anyway. Include our position, our condition, and the intelligence about the Devourer threat. If we don't make it home, at least the information might." As Park began transmitting their distress signal into the void, Jake made peace with the possibility that they might all die in this alien escape pod. But he also made himself a promise. If any of them survived to see Earth again, he would spend the rest of his life making up for the moments he had missed with Katie. The pod drifted through space, carrying 8 wounded humans and secrets that could determine the fate of 2 civilizations. Time was running out for Johnson and Martinez, but Jake refused to give up hope. He had spent 30 years learning how to overcome impossible odds. Now he just had to do it one more time for Katie's sake. The bridge of the UCS Ranger hummed with activity as Captain Helen Park studied the distress signal that had just reached their long-range communications array. The message was weak and distorted, coming from deep in what had been Zephyrian-controlled space, but the authentication codes were unmistakably from Colonel Morrison's missing unit. How long ago was this transmitted? Parks asked her communications officer. Based on the signal degradation and our knowledge of their last position, at least 18 hours ago, they could be anywhere within a 50 light-year radius. Parks reviewed the partial message that had come through. Morrison's team was alive but injured, drifting in an alien escape pod with limited life support. More importantly, they had intelligence about something called the Devourers that Command needed to hear immediately. "Set course for the signal origin point and engage maximum jump speed," Parks ordered. "How long to reach the search area?" "At current velocity, 14 hours. But Captain, that's assuming they're still transmitting and that their life support is holding out." Parks studied the star charts showing the vast empty region where Morrison's team was lost. Finding a small escape pod in that much space would be like locating a single grain of sand on a beach. But she had served with Jake Morrison during the Titan colony uprising 8 years ago. If anyone could keep his people alive in an impossible situation, it was him. "Send a message to Fleet Command. Tell them we've made contact with the missing reconnaissance team and are proceeding to their last known position. Request permission to exceed standard jump protocols if necessary." The reply from Command came back within an hour. Admiral Watson himself had authorized Parks to use whatever means necessary to recover Morrison's team and their intelligence. The mention of a new alien threat called the Devourers had apparently caused significant concern at the highest levels of military leadership. As the Ranger raced through jump space toward the search coordinates, Parks found herself thinking about Morrison's personal situation. She knew about his daughter's wedding because the entire officer corps had been talking about it. Jake Morrison was legendary for his dedication to duty, but everyone knew the cost that dedication had extracted from his family life. "Captain, we're receiving another transmission from the escape pod," reported Lieutenant Commander Walsh from the communication station. "It's much weaker than the first one, but we can make out some of the content." Parks listened to the static-filled message with growing concern. Morrison reported that 2 of his people were critically injured and might not survive much longer. Their alien life support systems were failing, and they had been forced to use Zephyrian medical technology with unknown effects on human physiology. "How much longer until we reach the search area?" Parks asked. 11 hours at current speed. "But Captain, I should mention that our jump drive is already operating at 110% of normal parameters. Pushing it harder could result in catastrophic failure." Parks weighed the risks. The Ranger carried a crew of 300 people, whose lives would be endangered if the jump drive failed. But Morrison's team had critical intelligence that could affect the survival of the entire human species. And beyond the strategic considerations, Parks couldn't abandon fellow soldiers who were counting on rescue. "How much more speed can we get if we push the drive to maximum?" "Maybe another 20% increase in velocity, but the risk of system failure goes up exponentially. We could end up stranded in jump space ourselves." Parks made her decision. "Do it. Override the safety protocols and give me everything the drive has got. If Morrison's intelligence is as important as Command thinks it is, then the risk is justified. The ship shuddered as the engineering team pushed the experimental jump drive beyond its design limits. Throughout the vessel, crew members felt the change in the engine harmonics that indicated they were now traveling faster than any human ship had ever gone before. In the escape pod, Jake Morrison was fighting his own battle against time and technology. Private Johnson had slipped into a coma despite their attempts to treat his head injury with Zephyrian medical devices. Martinez was barely conscious, his internal bleeding getting worse by the hour. The alien life support systems were providing breathable air but at an increasingly irregular rate. "Colonel, the crystal matrix that powers this pod is destabilizing," Park reported. "I think it's trying to adapt to our human biology, but it's not designed for our type of life forms. We might have 6 hours of reliable life support left, maybe less." Jake checked his chronometer and calculated their chances. Even if the Ranger had received their distress signal immediately, it would take hours for any rescue ship to reach their position. And that assumed the search team could locate a small pod drifting in the vastness of space. "Keep working on boosting our signal strength," Jake ordered. "The longer we can transmit, the better chance they have of finding us." Jake pulled himself over to where Martinez lay semi-conscious against the pod's curved wall. The young soldier looked pale and weak, but his eyes focused when Jake approached. "Colonel, I need to tell you something," Martinez whispered. "My sister Rosa is getting married next month. I was supposed to walk her down the aisle because our father died when she was little." Jake felt his heart clench with familiar pain. "You're going to make it home for that wedding, soldier. I promise you that. If I don't, will you tell her that I tried? Will you tell her that I wanted to be there? You're going to tell her yourself." Jake moved to check on Johnson, whose condition continued to deteriorate. Torres had done everything possible with the limited medical supplies available, but without proper surgical facilities, there was little hope for recovery. As Jake sat in the alien pod watching his soldiers fight for their lives, he thought about all the moments he had missed with Katie while pursuing missions like this one. How many school plays had he skipped for training exercises? How many birthdays had he missed for deployment schedules? How many times had he chosen the abstract concept of duty over the concrete reality of his daughter's love? "Colonel, I'm getting a response to our distress signal," Park announced with excitement. "It's the Ranger. Captain Park says they're en route to our position and should reach us within hours." Jake felt a surge of hope mixed with determination. Helen Parks was a good officer and a skilled ship commander. If anyone could find them in this vast emptiness, it was her. "How are our power levels holding up?" "The signal boost is draining our remaining energy faster than expected. I can maintain communications for maybe another 3 hours, but then we'll be completely dark." Jake made another command decision. "Keep transmitting as long as possible. The Ranger needs a signal to home in on, and our people on the ground need to know help is coming." As the escape pod continued its lonely drift through space, Jake Morrison held onto two things: his determination to get his surviving soldiers home safely, and his growing resolve to make things right with Katie if he lived through this mission. The race against time had become personal. For the first time in his military career, Jake Morrison was fighting not just for duty or honor, but for the chance to be the father his daughter deserved. Katie Morrison Cooper stood at the altar of St. Mary's Chapel, her hand in Ben's as they prepared to exchange wedding rings. The ceremony had been beautiful despite her father's absence, and she had managed to smile through most of it. Her mother Lisa had walked her down the aisle with dignity and love, filling the role that Jake Morrison had abandoned. But as the minister began the final blessing, Katie felt the familiar ache of loss that had marked so many important moments in her life. "The rings you exchanged today are symbols of your eternal commitment," the minister said to the congregation of 200, friends and family members. "Let them remind you that love requires presence, attention, and the daily choice to put your partner's needs before your own." Katie heard those words and thought about her father's 30-year absence from her life. Jake Morrison had never learned the lesson about putting family before duty, and now it was too late. Even if he survived whatever mission had been more important than her wedding, she would never forgive him for this final abandonment. Ben squeezed her hand gently, sensing her emotional struggle. At the altar, he represented everything her father was not: present, reliable, and committed to building a life together rather than chasing military glory across the galaxy. "Do you have the rings?" the minister asked Ben's best man. As the ring bearer stepped forward, a commotion stirred at the back of the chapel. Several guests turned to look toward the entrance, their faces showing confusion and surprise. Katie noticed the distraction, but tried to stay focused on the ceremony. Nothing was going to ruin this moment, not even late-arriving guests. But the murmur from the congregation grew louder, and she heard someone gasp audibly. Against her better judgment, Katie turned to see what was causing the disruption. The chapel doors had burst open and a group of people in military uniforms were entering. But these weren't dress uniforms for a formal occasion. These were battle-scarred combat fatigues still showing signs of recent fighting. The lead figure limped slightly as he walked, his left leg obviously injured but supporting his weight. Through sheer determination, Katie's heart stopped as she recognized her father's. Colonel Jake Morrison walked down the center aisle of the chapel, flanked by 7 soldiers in damaged combat gear. Their uniforms bore scorch marks and torn fabric that spoke of recent battles. Several of the men showed visible injuries, bandages visible beneath their tactical vests. But they moved in perfect formation, their military bearing intact despite their obvious exhaustion. The congregation fell silent as the battle-worn soldiers made their way toward the altar. Jake's eyes never left his daughter's face as he approached, his expression showing a mixture of relief, love, and desperate hope for forgiveness. "Katie," Jake said when he reached the front of the chapel. His voice was hoarse from exhaustion, but it carried clearly through the silent sanctuary. "I'm sorry I'm late." Katie stared at her father in shock. He looked older than she remembered, with new lines around his eyes and gray in his hair that hadn't been there 6 months ago. His combat uniform was torn and dirty, and she could see blood on his sleeve from what appeared to be a recent injury. "You came," she whispered, hardly believing what she was seeing. "I promised you I would be here for the most important day of your life. I know I'm late, but I'm here now." The minister looked uncertain about how to proceed with this unusual interruption. Ben Cooper studied the man who had just appeared to claim his place in Katie's life. The father who had been absent for so many years but had somehow made it home for this moment. Jake stepped closer to his daughter, his voice carrying to every corner of the chapel. "Katie, I have spent 30 years serving my country and protecting strangers while failing to be the father you deserved. I missed your first steps, your first day of school, your graduation, and 1,000 other moments that mattered more than any mission I ever completed." Tears were streaming down Katie's face now, but she didn't speak. 3 days ago, I made the same choice I've made 100 times before. I chose duty over family and left for what I thought was another mission. But somewhere in the depths of space, fighting for my life aboard an alien ship, I realized that all the battles I've won and all the lives I've saved mean nothing if I lose the love of my daughter. Jake gestured to his battle-scarred team standing behind him. "These soldiers risked everything to help me get home to you. Sergeant Rodriguez gave his life so that we could escape and I could be here today. They understood something that took me 30 years to learn, that the people we love are worth any sacrifice." Katie looked at the 7 soldiers standing at attention behind her father. Despite their injuries and exhaustion, they had traveled across the galaxy to help Jake Morrison make it to his daughter's wedding. Their presence spoke of loyalty and brotherhood that transcended military duty. "I don't expect you to forgive me immediately," Jake continued. "I don't expect you to forget 30 years of absence and disappointment. But I'm asking for the chance to be the father I should have been from the beginning. I'm asking for the chance to walk you down this aisle and give you away to a man who will never make you compete with his job for his love." The chapel remained silent as Katie struggled with emotions she had been suppressing for years. Anger at his absence, relief at his survival, and a desperate hope that maybe it wasn't too late for them to have a real relationship. Ben Cooper stepped forward and addressed Jake directly. "Colonel Morrison, I'm Ben Cooper. I love your daughter more than anything in the world, and I promise you that she will never have to choose between my career and my attention. She will always come first." Jake studied the young man who was about to become his son-in-law. Ben's face showed intelligence, kindness, and genuine love for Katie. Everything that Jake had failed to provide as a father, this man was prepared to offer as a husband. "Take care of her," Jake said simply. "Love her the way she deserves to be loved." Katie finally found her voice. "Dad, you're really here." "I'm here, sweetheart. And if you'll let me, I'd like to walk you the rest of the way down this aisle." Katie looked at her mother, who was crying quietly in the front pew. Lisa nodded her approval, understanding that this moment was bigger than past hurts and disappointments. The minister cleared his throat and addressed the unusual situation with grace. Perhaps we could pause the ceremony briefly while the bride's father takes his proper place. Jake offered his arm to Katie, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. Together, they walked the final steps to where Ben waited at the altar. Jake's limp was barely noticeable as he focused on the privilege of escorting his daughter to her new life. When they reached Ben, Jake placed Katie's hand in her fiancé's and spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Ben Cooper, I entrust you with the most precious thing in my universe. Promise me you'll never take her for granted the way I did. I promise." "Sir?" Jake stepped back and took his place in the front pew next to Lisa, who squeezed his hand despite their complicated history. His 7 soldiers arranged themselves quietly in the back of the chapel, honored to witness this moment of redemption. As the minister resumed the ceremony, Katie felt a completeness she had never expected to experience. Her father was here, battered and late but present for the moment that mattered most. The empty chair that had symbolized his absence was filled at last. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Katie kissed Ben with joy that was no longer shadowed by loss. As they walked back down the aisle together, she saw her father standing and applauding with tears in his eyes. The reception that followed became a celebration, not just of Katie and Ben's marriage, but of family bonds that had survived years of separation and misunderstanding. Jake spent the evening meeting his daughter's friends, learning about her life, and beginning the long process of becoming the father she had always needed. As the night ended and the guests departed, Jake found a quiet moment alone with Katie. "I know I can't make up for 30 years of absence," he said, "but I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying." Katie hugged her father tightly, feeling for the first time like she truly had a dad. "You made it home," she whispered. "That's what matters now." Jake Morrison had finally learned that the greatest victory wasn't defeating alien empires or saving colonies. It was earning the love and forgiveness of his daughter and being present for the moments that truly mattered in life.